All right, welcome back to the deep dive. And, I want you to do something for me. Just take a second. Look at the date on your phone or your calendar on the wall. It is Wednesday, January 21, 2026. And on the surface, it looks like a completely normal Wednesday, doesn't it? The coffee is brewing, traffic is probably doing its thing, the weather is what it is. But if you look at the stack of research we have on the desk today, and I mean, this stack is physically heavy, you realize that just underneath that surface of normalcy, the tectonic plates of the world are shifting faster than they ever have before.
It's that deceptive calm, isn't it? We are, in a way, standing on the edge of a cliff, but the fog is so thick that most people just think it's a gentle slope. They're just, walking the dog.
Okay. And I think our job today is to blow away some of that fog. We're looking at a convergence of, well, a few really powerful forces. We got Ray Kurzweil's timeline, which, by the way, we are rapidly running out of track on.
Very rapid.
We have these staggering economic reports from sources like The Guardian and The Motley Fool about a financial bubble that, frankly, makes the dot-com era look like a lemonade stand.
It really does.
Yeah.
The scale is just different.
And then we have some pretty heavy historical data about what happens to human beings when technology makes their labor optional.
Optional is a very polite word for it. I think obsolete might be the word the economists would use, in private.
Right. And look, we know who is listening today. We've really tailored this deep dive with a specific lens. We're thinking about you, the listener, who is looking at your retirement horizon. Maybe you're 60, maybe you're 70, or even older. You're a senior, you've worked your whole life, you saved responsibly, and now you're watching the news and you have to be thinking, is the world changing so fast that my entire plan just doesn't work anymore?
That is the defining question, right? If you're planning for the next 20 years, you simply cannot use the logic of the last 20 years. The rules of the game are fundamentally changing. The assets that used to feel safe might not be. And the risks we used to worry about are being replaced by entirely new ones that we're only just beginning to understand.
So here's the mission for this deep dive. We are going to map out what this singularity is and why the date 2029 or should be keeping people awake at night. Then we're going to look at the great gamble, the trillions, and I mean trillions of dollars being poured into AI data centers as we speak.
And we'll look at the risk side of that too, the wall.
Yes, the wall. And then we're going to look back at, of all things, the humble turnip. Yes, the vegetable, to understand why your job, or maybe your kids' or your grandkids' jobs, might be in serious danger. And finally, we're going to pivot to the solution, to what you can actually do. How do you stop thinking like a laborer and start thinking like an owner?
Survival through ownership. That's the theme, really. If labor is dying, capital is king.
Let's start with the hook, then. Ray Kurzweil. The book is The Singularity is Nearer. He released it back in 2024. Now, Kurzweil has been around forever. Some people think he's a prophet. Others think he's a bit of a crackpot.
He gets both, for sure.
But the thing is, his track record on predictions is actually unsettlingly accurate.
It really is. He's not a psychic. He's more of a mathematician of history. He just plots the curve of technological progress, and it's an exponential curve. And years ago, he pinned the year 2029 as the date when artificial intelligence would pass a valid Turing test.
And just to clarify for everyone, for those of us who aren't computer scientists, a Turing test isn't just, can it write a bad poem or answer a trivia question?
Oh, no, we're way past that. A valid Turing test means a machine that is functionally indistinguishable from a human being in conversation, in reasoning, humor, nuance, creativity. If you're having a text exchange with it, you genuinely cannot tell if it's a person or a chaotic array of silicon on the other end.
And here in 2026, looking at the latest models coming out of OpenAI and Google and Anthropic, we are arguably already flirting with that line.
We're getting very, very close. But 2029 is his benchmark for human-level intelligence across the board.
Okay, so let's just let that sink in.
Yeah.
2029. That is 3 years from now. That's the length of a car lease. That is a high schooler's time until they graduate. That isn't the future in some abstract sense anymore. That's practically next Tuesday.
Exactly, and that's just the first date. That's the appetizer. He predicts 2045 is the main event, the singularity. That is the moment where the line between human and machine just dissolves. We merge with the technology. We expand our effective intelligence, he says, 1,000,000-fold.
1,000,000-fold. I can barely decide what to have for lunch most days. I have no idea what I'd do with 1,000,000 times more intelligence.
Well, the idea, and it's a profound one, is that biology is slow and it's limited. It's messy. Silicon, on the other hand, is fast, and it's scalable. So if you merge the two, we stop being purely biological entities. It sounds like pure science fiction, I know, but if you look at the exponential curve of computing power Moore's law on steroids, it's where the math leads.
But let's bring it back to the concrete reality of January 2026, because we aren't merging with machines yet. Mostly we're just staring at them and trying to figure out what they're for. But the financial world is betting everything that Kurzweil is right. We have a report here from The Guardian, and it focuses on this great gamble. The numbers are, well, they're just hard to visualize. They estimate $2.9 trillion is being spent on data centers.
Yeah, let's try to contextualize that number because it's so big it's meaningless. $2.9 trillion. That is roughly the entire gross domestic product of the United Kingdom.
The entire UK economy.
The entire economic output of a G7 nation. And we are taking that value and pouring it into concrete, servers, fiber optics, cooling systems, and massive power grids, all just to build the brain of this new AI.
And without these data centers, the AI is just code in the dark, right? It needs a physical body to run on.
It absolutely does. These data centers are the central nervous system. The software is the mind, but the data center is the actual brain matter. And the companies building them, the big tech giants, are spending money like it's water. We're seeing NVIDIA's market capitalization has exceeded $4 trillion.
$4 trillion. That's what, bigger than the GDP of France? Bigger than India?
It is. It's a nation-state level valuation for a single company that makes chips. And the competition for the human talent is just as absurd. We're seeing reports of $100 million signing bonuses.
Whoa, stop. $100 million for a CEO, right?
That's the crazy part. Not for a CEO, for a top-tier researcher, for an engineer. This is what companies like Meta were reportedly offering to poach the top minds from OpenAI. It is a gold rush in the purest sense of the term. The talent is the gold.
But see, this is where I get skeptical. And I think our listeners, especially the seniors who have seen a few market cycles, who lived through the dot-com bust in 2008, they're probably squinting a bit right now. Because usually, when money flies around like that, it ends badly. In a gold rush, most of the miners go broke. It's the people selling the shovels who get rich. So are we in a new land of plenty? Or are we just blowing up the biggest, most concentrated bubble in human history?
That is the trillion-dollar question, literally. And this is where we have to introduce the counterargument, the wall theory. We have insights here from Yoshua Bengio. He's considered one of the three godfathers of modern AI. He helped invent this stuff.
So he's not some random skeptic. He's an insider.
He is the ultimate insider. And he's raising a red flag. He's saying there is a very real possibility that progress could stall.
So how? Like the AI just stops getting smarter, we hit a plateau.
Essentially, yes. The current method for making AI smarter is what's called scaling. You just make the model bigger, you feed it more data from the internet, you give it more computing power, and it gets smarter. It's a brute force approach. But David Bader, another data science expert, uses this brilliant analogy that I think perfectly captures the risk here. He says what we are doing right now is building taller ladders to reach the moon.
Taller ladders to reach the moon.
We keep adding rungs, the ladder gets higher, our view gets better, but a ladder, no matter how tall, will never get you to the moon.
Okay, but I want to push back on that analogy for just a second, because a ladder is still incredibly useful. If I build a 500-foot ladder, I can see further than anyone else. I can pick fruit from the tallest trees. I can fix my roof. I can do a lot of useful, profitable things. Just because I don't reach the moon doesn't mean the ladder is garbage.
That is a completely fair point, and it's true that the ladder we have now is already proving to be very profitable. But here's the financial trap. If you have spent $2.9 trillion because you promised your investors you are going to the moon, if the entire valuation of your company is based on a moon or bust outcome, and you end up just sitting on top of a very tall, very expensive ladder, the math breaks.
Ah, I see. So the utility is there, but the valuation, the stock price, assumes we become gods.
Precisely. If getting to true AGI that human-level thinking Kurzweil predicts for 2029 requires a rocket ship, meaning a fundamental paradigm shift in how the software works, and we're just building better and better ladders, then eventually we hit a wall. We hit a point of diminishing returns. And if we hit that wall, the financial fallout could be absolutely catastrophic.
Because all that money, that entire British GDP worth of cash, it just evaporates.
It creates a crater. And it's not just tech company cash being burned. This is the really scary part for our listener who is looking at their retirement portfolio. We're seeing massive exposure in the debt markets. You have this thing called private credit funding these data centers. Meta borrowed $29 billion to build theirs, and guess who buys that debt? Pension funds.
Oh, no.
Yes. Pension funds are exposed to this.
So if the Magnificent Seven, those top tech stocks that now make up, what, over a third of the S&P 500, if they stumble because the AI doesn't deliver the moon, it's not just a bad day for Silicon Valley.
No, it drags the entire global market down with it. If you have a standard diversified 401k or an IRA, you're heavily exposed to the single bet whether you know it or not. It could look a lot like 2008, but with robots instead of subprime mortgages.
That is not very comforting. But there's a middle ground here, right?
Yeah.
A counter-argument to this doom and gloom. We have Benedict Evans. He's a sharp analyst, always has really insightful newsletters, and his perspective is basically, who cares if we reach the moon?
Right. Evans is the pragmatist in the room. He argues that even if we don't create God, even if true AGI never ever happens, the generative AI we have right now, here in early 2026, is already fundamentally changing entire industries.
So you're saying even the ladder is tall enough to disrupt everything from the top down?
Exactly. Just look at advertising, look at computer programming, look at how search engines work. These multi-trillion-dollar industries are being rewritten by the technology that exists today. Evans argues that whether it's the full-blown singularity or just a massive efficiency boom, the transformation is real. The train has already left the station.
So whether we crash or whether we soar to the moon, we aren't going back to the way things were in 2023.
No, that world is gone. The old map is useless.
Speaking of the old world, let's pivot to history for a second. Because whenever I talk to people about AI taking jobs, the standard response is always the Luddite argument. You know, they say, oh, people freaked out that the tractor would kill all the farming jobs, but we just got new, better jobs. We stopped farming and started building cars.
Technology creates more jobs than it destroys. That's the economist's mantra. It's been true for 200 years.
But has it been a smooth process? We have a paper here from the Munich Personal Repec Archive that actually looks at the mechanics of the agricultural revolution.
Yeah.
And it wasn't exactly a smooth ride, was it? It wasn't like everyone just put down their hoe on a Tuesday and picked up a wrench at the Ford factory on Wednesday.
No, it was a brutal, painful, multi-generational transition. And the paper focuses on the mechanics of what they call the takeoff and the key technology. It wasn't a computer or a steam engine at first. It was the turnip.
The turnip. We are basing our economic future on a root vegetable. I'm not sure how I feel about that.
Bear with me, it's a perfect analogy. Before the turnip, farmers had to leave their fields empty fallow every few years to let the soil recover its nutrients. But the introduction of the turnip and new crop rotation systems allowed for nitrogen fixation in the soil. More importantly, turnips provided winter feed for livestock.
Okay, so before the turnip, you had to slaughter most of your herd in the autumn because you couldn't feed them through the winter.
Exactly. Now, suddenly, you can keep your entire herd alive. More cows means more manure means better fertilizer means dramatically higher crop yields. All of a sudden, agricultural productivity just explodes. You don't need 80% of your population working in the fields just to keep the nation from starving. You can do it with 60%, then 40%, then 20%.
So on paper, that's fantastic news. We have food security. Humanity wins.
Humanity wins in the long run, yes. But the individual peasant loses everything in the short run. Because the landowners, the aristocracy, they realized they could make much more money with fewer people, with more efficient crops like turnips, and by raising sheep for wool. So they fenced off the common lands. That's the famous enclosure movement. They literally kicked millions of people off the land their families had worked for centuries.
And the paper uses this very sterile term, released labor.
Released. It sounds so gentle, doesn't it? You've been released from your duties.
It means you're unemployed, you're homeless, and you're probably starving.
It means you have no choice but to migrate to the newly forming cities, which were overcrowded, full of disease, and you had to try and find work in the emerging factories for starvation wages. But, and this is the absolute crucial point for our listener, in 2026, there was a wait time. A huge lag.
The lag effect.
A massive one. It took decades for the new industrial sector to grow big enough to absorb that massive displaced labor force. The paper points out that in the U.S., without that shift of labor from farms, industrialization would have been delayed by 40 years. But for the actual people living through those 40 years, it was just misery.
And that's the messy middle that we are in right now.
That is exactly where we are. AI is the new turnip. It is drastically increasing productivity in the cognitive sector in white-collar office work.
Yep.
It is releasing labor from offices. But the new economy, whatever that is, whatever comes next, hasn't fully stabilized or grown large enough yet to absorb all of those people.
So if you're a graphic designer today, or a copywriter, or a paralegal, or a mid-level manager, you are the farmer in 1780 looking at the new enclosure fence, wondering where on earth you're supposed to go next.
And this creates what economists call a drag on economic growth. Everyone assumes this amazing new technology instantly boosts GDP. But in the transition period, it can actually cause a slump because you have mass displacement before you have the new boom.
Let's try to put some hard numbers on that displacement, because for our listeners, this isn't an abstract historical exercise. If you have kids in their 30s or 40s, you might be seeing this happen to them or their friends right now. We've got reports here from Inshin Today and Supple that cite the World Economic Forum.
And the numbers are really stark. For the period leading up to 2027, they predicted 83 million jobs would be lost globally and 69 million new ones would be created.
Okay, I'm not a math genius, but 83 minus 69, that is a net loss of 14 million jobs.
That's the singularity point for the labor market. And the problem isn't just the raw number, as scary as that is. It's the mismatch in skills. The jobs being created require very high-level skills, prompt engineering, AI ethics, complex AI system management. The jobs being lost are the routine, entry to mid-level cognitive tasks.
Right. You can't just take someone who was laid off from a call center and make them a senior AI architect overnight. The
Yeah.
skills don't transfer.
No, they absolutely don't. So we're seeing a dangerous polarization of society. The reports call it the AI rich versus AI poor. You have a small group of people who either own the AI systems or know how to wield them at an expert level, and their productivity and income are skyrocketing. And then you have a growing group of people who are being displaced by it. In 2025 alone, we saw 55,000 layoffs in the U.S., where the companies specifically cited AI as the reason. An MIT study says 11.7% of jobs can be profitably replaced by AI right now, not in 10 years, today.
And we have to talk about the fact that it's not just about the paycheck. We have a study here from the International Journal of Innovative Science and Research Technology about the psychological impact of long-term unemployment. It's interesting. Well, it's heavy stuff to read.
It's essential to understand this part of it. Work provides so much more than money. It provides a structure for your day. It provides social status. It provides a powerful sense of purpose.
It's the first question we ask someone when we meet them at a party, isn't it? So what do you do?
Exactly. And if the answer is nothing, or worse, a machine does what I used to do, but better and for free, that is a devastating blow to a person's ego and self-worth. The interviews in this study are heartbreaking. People saying things like, I feel worthless, or I feel depressed, and I don't know who I am anymore.
It's a full-blown identity crisis.
And it connects directly to strain on family relationships, a rise in depression anxiety. And this is why, when we pivot to the investment strategy in a moment, I really want the listener to understand this isn't just about greed or getting rich. It's about building a foundation of security. In a world where working for a living might become an outdated concept for a large part of the population, you need a different anchor for your life.
Okay, before we get to the solution, to the anchor, we have one more conceptual hurdle to get over, and it's a big one. We have a piece here by Paul Mason from The Guardian from a few years back, and the title is just. It's The End of Capitalism Has Begun. That is a bold title.
It is, but the logic behind it is fascinating, and it's more relevant now than when he wrote it. It centers on what economists call the zero marginal cost problem.
Okay, break that down for us. What does that mean?
In traditional capitalism, things are scarce. It costs money to make a physical chair. You need wood, you need labor, you need factory space. If you want to make a second chair, it costs roughly the same amount. But what about information? Or software? Or an AI model? Once you've spent the millions to build the first version, what does it cost to make a copy? Or to have one more user run a query?
Basically zero. It's just electrons.
Exactly. Information wants to be free. And if the cost of reproduction falls to zero, then in a perfectly competitive market, the price should also fall to zero. But companies like Google and Meta and Microsoft, the modern monopolies, are fighting tooth and nail to prevent that. They are trying to build walls to privatize information that is naturally abundant.
So they're basically building fences around the infinite.
They have to. It's the only way their business model survives. Mason brings up this old Marxian concept called the general intellect, which predicted that knowledge itself would eventually become the primary productive force in the economy. And if knowledge is free and abundant and can do all the work, capitalism as we know it, which is based on scarcity and wages for labor, it gets blown sky high.
This all sounds like a post-capitalism future. A world where maybe money doesn't even mean the same thing. But, and this is a really big but, we are not there yet. We are in 2026, and in 2026, our listener still needs dollars to buy groceries, to pay property taxes, and to handle medical bills.
Correct. We are in the transition, and the transition is where all the danger lies. You do not want to be the person holding on to the value of your labor when labor's value is crashing, and simultaneously owning zero capital when capital's value is exploding.
Okay, so let's get to the actionable part of this deep dive. The senior pivot, as we're calling it. The listener's core question was, how do I not get eliminated? And the answer we've derived from all these sources is pretty stark. To survive the obsolescence of labor, one must own the capital.
And to be more specific, you must own the stocks of the companies creating the AI. The philosophy is simple, if a little brutal. If your job is being replaced by a machine, you must own the machine that replaces you.
Well, wait a minute. We just spent 10 minutes talking about a massive bubble. We talked about hitting a wall. We just said $2.9 trillion might be a colossal waste of money. So how is it safe to just dump your retirement savings into a handful of frothy tech stocks? That sounds like the opposite of what a senior investor should be doing.
And that's absolutely the right question to ask. It highlights the risk, right? But let's look at the argument from Ben Rogoff. He's a tech fund manager cited in Interactive Investor. He argues that the extreme concentration we see in the Big Five or the Magnificent Seven companies like Microsoft, NVIDIA, Alphabet is actually justified.
Justified how? I mean, everything I've ever learned about investing says concentration is bad. Diversify, diversify, diversify. Buy the whole index.
Rogoff uses the electrification analogy. When electricity was being rolled out a century ago, it wasn't a niche product for one industry. It was a sweeping, universal utility. It became the fundamental infrastructure for everything else. He argues these big tech companies are not building apps. They're building the rails.
The rails.
The new infrastructure, the power grid for intelligence. And they have scale advantages in data, in talent, in capital that simply cannot be replicated. You can't just start a competitor to Microsoft Azure or Google Cloud in your garage anymore. The capital requirements are in the tens of billions. So these companies have what are called economic moats the size of oceans.
So his argument is that even if the application layer is bubbly, even if the 1,000th AI-powered dog-walking app goes bust, the companies selling the underlying electricity, the compute power, are still going to win.
That is the core thesis. However, to your point, betting on a single horse is still incredibly dangerous. NVIDIA is worth $4 trillion today, but what if a competitor designs a new chip? What if government regulation hits Google hard? What if a CEO at Apple makes a series of bad decisions?
And that brings us to the ETF strategy. The Motley Fool has an updated list for 2026 on the top artificial intelligence ETFs. This is really for our listener, our senior learner, who wants to own the trend, but not bet the farm on one single stock. They want to bet on the whole casino, not on one gambler at one table.
Exactly. This is the safest vehicle for this strategy. An ETF, or exchange-traded fund, mitigates the blow-up risk of any single company while keeping you exposed to the entire sector's growth.
Okay, let's walk through the top 5 they list. I want to give you, the listener, a clear menu here. Number 1 on their list is the Global X Artificial Intelligence and Technology ETF. The ticker is AIQ.
Right. AIQ is the heavyweight. It's the largest and one of the most established options. What's interesting about AIQ is its blend. It holds the obvious American giants Alphabet, Meta, but it also holds international hardware players like Samsung, AMD, and Micron.
So it's covering both the big software brains and the big hardware manufacturers, the whole stack.
Exactly. It's a very broad bet on the entire tech ecosystem that supports AI. If AI continues to grow, AIQ should grow with it. It's probably the closest thing to a set it and forget it option for broad exposure to this theme.
Okay, next up is BOTZ. That's the Global X Robotics and Artificial Intelligence ETF. Ticker is BOTZ. I love the ticker, but what's actually inside it?
So BOTZ is, as the name implies, more focused on the physical manifestation of AI, robotics. Its top holding, no surprise, is NVIDIA, which is pretty much ubiquitous in all of these funds, but it also holds industrial companies like ABB and FANUC.
FANUC, I confess I haven't heard of them.
They're a Japanese giant in industrial automation. They make the big, yellow robot arms you see in car factories. This connects right back to our Industrial Revolution theme. If manufacturing is being automated or brought back on shore, FANUC is the company building the arms that build the cars. So BOTZ is a play on physical automation, not just chatbots and software.
That's a great distinction. Okay, number 3 is Robo, the Robo Global Robotics and Automation Index.
This one is interesting because it's much more diversified across a larger number of companies. It leans more into smaller and mid-sized caps. It's not just the trillion-dollar giants. For instance, it holds companies like Teradyne, which makes automated testing equipment for semiconductors, and a company called Symbotic.
Symbotic, I've heard of them. They do the warehouse robotics for Walmart, right?
That's the one. If you believe that the future of logistics and supply chains is going to be fully automated, if you think the future is robots moving boxes around in a dark warehouse, Robo gives you direct exposure to the companies doing that unglamorous but essential grunt work.
Okay, then we have ARTY. That's the iShares Future AI and Tech ETF, ARTY.
ARTY is a good choice if you're looking for more international exposure. It specifically includes emerging markets. For example, it holds Naver, which is essentially the Google of South Korea. If you believe, as many do, that AI isn't just an American story, that Asia is going to be a major player, then ARTY helps broaden that geographical horizon for you.
And finally, number 5 on the list is ROBT, the first Trust NASDAQ AI and Robotics ETF.
ROBT is a little more niche, a little more focused. It holds companies like UiPath, which is all about software bots, what they call robotic process automation, and Serve Robotics, which makes those little sidewalk delivery robots. This is maybe for the investor who wants to capture the more specific day-to-day applications of robots in business and city life.
So we have 5 different flavors here. AIQ for the broad global tech bet, BOTZ for a more hardware and NVIDIA-heavy play, Robo for diversification into smaller companies, ARTY for a global, including emerging markets, perspective, and RBT for those niche robotics applications.
And the core advice for the senior investor is simple. Don't try to be a hero and pick the one winner. We don't know if Google's AI will ultimately beat OpenAI's. We don't know if Amazon will beat Microsoft in the cloud wars 5 years from now. But we know the sector as a whole is eating the economy. By buying one of these ETFs, you own the singularity as a concept, rather than betting your retirement on a single CEO's vision.
It's owning the entire haystack instead of spending all your time and energy looking for one needle.
Precisely. And in a world where the value of a lifetime of labor is potentially falling, that haystack is your life raft.
Okay, so let's bring this all together. We've covered a lot of ground today, from turnips to trillion-dollar companies.
We certainly have. We started with the pretty sobering realization that the singularity, or at the very least a massive society-altering disruption, is on our doorstep. 2026 is the year the rubber really meets the road.
We acknowledged the very real risks, the financial bubble, the incredible amounts of debt, the hitting the wall possibility. This is not a guaranteed smooth ride to utopia.
No. And looking at the history of the agricultural revolution, we know the transition will be painful for a lot of people. That lag is real. Jobs are disappearing now, and the psychological toll of that is very real.
But for you, our listener, asking that fundamental question of how to survive this financially, the strategy is clear. You have to pivot your thinking from being a laborer to being a capital owner. You have to own a piece of the new means of production. And in 2026, the means of production is artificial intelligence.
And the most prudent, risk-managed way to do that is through a diversified vehicle like an ETF, such as AIQ or BOTZ. It allows you to participate in the growth of this general intellect without exposing your life savings to the ruin of a single company failing spectacularly.
I want to leave you with one final thought, a final provocation. You talked about Paul Mason and this idea of post-capitalism. He poses a really fascinating and, frankly, a mind-bending question. If we truly reach a world of zero marginal cost, a world where clean energy is nearly free, information is abundant, and robots do most of the work, does the stock market even survive?
It's the ultimate paradox of this whole strategy, isn't it? We are telling you to buy stocks to survive the transition to a new world. But if that transition is fully successful and the core concept of economic scarcity ends, do we still need money? If everything is abundant, stock prices, which are based on a company's future profits in a scarce world, might become a completely meaningless concept.
A world without stock markets.
Yeah.
I can't even wrap my head around what that looks like.
It's difficult, but that's the true singularity horizon. However, and this is the key takeaway for today, until that day comes, until money itself becomes obsolete, you still need money.
Right. Don't bet on the end of money just yet. For now, buy the ETFs. Prepare for the 2030 horizon. It's going to be a wild ride, but at least this way you'll have a ticket.
Indeed. Stay curious, stay critical, and try not to panic. The tools are there.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you in the future, which is apparently happening tomorrow.